I have been teaching my students about the Industrial Revolution, and how we went about it is we covered the causes. Like, why did England industrialize first? And in the big scheme of like global history, like there have been other global superpowers, like major empires. Like, why is it that England was the first to industrialize? Then we did a Shark Tank activity where they got different inventions from the Industrial Revolution, and they had to like build a business around it. So that would have to place them in the time in which that invention was invented, and think about like, okay, how does this improve society? How can I build a business around this? And why would a investor want to invest in this? Why is this product going to be successful at that time? Then we got into the effects, and there's levels to thinking, right? So like remembering and understanding are basic levels of thinking. So I could just have them I'll list the effects of the Industrial Revolution, and they could be like, okay, yes, this was, and they can like repeat back like this was an effect. The next step would be like why, so they can start to analyze and like apply that thinking. The top tier is like creating something, and so I had a thought that I wanted to communicate to them to think about thinking. It's like, okay, once you have learned this, like, what can we say about this? And the thought was that the world became smaller from the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution made the world smaller. And I had different groups search different things, but we found the distance between Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the average walking speed of a horse. And we found it would take, like, if you were riding by horse with like brakes, it would take 4 to 5 days. And if you're riding a train today, that it takes about 7.5 to 8.5 hours. Think about that. Or to sail from London to New York back in the day took about 42 days, or was that 7 weeks? And to fly that now takes about, I think it was like 6.5 hours, maybe more, maybe a little bit more. Doesn't matter. Think about that. In the same amount of time, you can now travel exponentially further. We're going from 5 days via horse to a few hours. So in 5 days on a train, like, you can go so much further. So we're thinking about like, what effects did the Industrial Revolution have? It made the world relatively smaller. Time and space are relative. Like, someone back in the day, your average person had a very small diameter or radius in which they traveled out of. Their world and their universe was very small. But with the train and with the engine, we could travel further in the same amount of time, or things that are further away can come to us. And then there's like the telegraph. If you're thinking of, it's like, imagine you wrote a letter to your boo in England. That would take like 42 days to get there, and then they'd write it and it'd be 42 days back. With the telegraph, like, you can communicate relatively instantly. And so I say, like, imagine like if this is the timeline and there's like major events that cause change in history. Let's say it's spaced out, if you're watching me on YouTube, like 4 inches. With the new traveling and communication technology, that's going down to like 1/2 inch. The time in between significant events. Therefore, the Industrial Revolution increased the rate of change for humanity. And if you look at us now, like, we are at, and this is what I said to my students, you are experiencing the most amount of consistent change compared to anyone in the history of humanity. Like, continuous just change is happening, and like things are changing very quickly, and the scale in which things are happening is much larger. And like, I just recently thought about this. I added another thought onto it, is I wonder why we have anxiety. Right? That like the consistency of change is increasing, and like it's difficult for us to make sense of it, and we're experiencing anxiety over the amount of change. So then the thought is, what do we do about that? How can we reduce our anxiety? Knowing that, like, okay, that might be causing some anxiety. What then? I have some thoughts, but I'd be interested in yours. Comment. By the way, I'm on YouTube. Something to think about.